This is Don Clodio. He was born on December 30th, 1923, and he is 88 years old. He looks good. He enlisted in the U.S. Army Air Corps in 1942 when he was 18 years old. After flight and gunnery training, he was assigned to the 15th Air Force, the 777th Squadron of the 464th Bombardment Group. The 15th Air Force was established November the 1st, 1943, and was tasked with the strategic bombing of Axis-controlled territories within the Mediterranean theater of operation, including the oil and gasoline production facility at Ploiești, Romania. The first commanding officer of the 15th was General Jimmy Doolittle. During the 19 months of flight operations, the 15th sustained a high casualty rate of 21,671 either killed, wounded, missing in action, or became POWs. Don was a bottom ball turret gunner on a consolidated B-24 Liberator bomber. His squadron was based in Panatella, Italy. On the 28th mission of the required 50 to be able to rotate back to the United States, his airplane was shot down by a group of enemy fighters on July 6, 1944. Don was able to climb out of his firing position, put on his parachute, and bail out along with 6 of his 10 crew members. 4 of his crew members did not survive the attack. Don said that when he pulled the ripcord, the shock of the deployment knocked off one of his boots. That Don hit the ground. He had landed on the Austria-Hungary border. When he stood up to take off his parachute, he was fired upon by a German patrol, a bullet narrowly missing his ear. After considering his odds of survival, at this point he had no choice but to surrender to enemy forces. After considering his odds of survival, at this point, he had no choice but to surrender to enemy forces. Only then did he realize that he had been wounded in the upper right clavicle area of his chest by the machine gun fire from the enemy fighters. Don still carries that shrapnel in his chest to this day. Don was sent to a German military hospital in Vienna, Austria, to treat his wound while also being interrogated and put into solitary confinement. Don said he lost all track of time, but he thinks he was at this location for about 3 weeks. Don turned 21 years old while in captivity. He, along with hundreds of other POWs, were transported north through Germany and arrived at Stalag Luft 4 on August the 1st, 1944, in what is now Poland. Don said the living conditions at the POW camp were tolerable, but food was in short supply, and they depended on the Red Cross partials when they did receive them. Clothing was adequate. Since the camp was almost exclusively NCOs, and Don held the rank of Staff Sergeant, he was not forced into work details. As the Allies were closing in from the east and the war was nearing its end, Stalag 4 started dispersing its prisoners to other camps westward into Germany. The sick and wounded were loaded onto trains. But out of the nearly 10,000 POWs, 6,000 were forced to march over 500 miles, which took 87 days during one of Europe's coldest winters. This march became known as the Death March across Germany. The prisoners on this march endured unimaginable hardship. Don survived this terrible ordeal. Over 1,200 did not. Finally, on May the 5th, 1945, Don, as well as thousands of other POWs, were liberated by Allied forces. Don said by this time the soles of the the boots that the Germans had given him had worn so thin that if he'd stepped on a nickel, he could have told you what side was up. It's a lot of walking. When Don returned home after having achieved the rank of tech sergeant, receiving the Air Medal with 3 clusters and the Purple Heart for his injuries, Don settled back into civilian life and returned to his job with Western Electric. He retired after 30 years with Unocal in Port Neches. He and his wife Billy have been residents of Wildwood since 1983. Don is a member of the Methodist Church of Wildwood and a charter life member of the VFW Post 1514 in Village Mills. Don, when your generation was called into service by our nation, you answered that call and served with honor. And tonight, we honor your service. Yes, sir.